President of TMA, Secretary, other office bearers, and dear friends. It's a pleasure to be back here on a very familiar stage or platform and talking to TMA. My association with TMA goes back to, I think, 1988 when I got previous Angulipal made me a member of TMA that year. That was a year I think we held the first national management convention of which we came to be known as Shri. And that's another story by itself. So it's been a long association and I have mostly very pleasant memories. Today, what I supposed to do is just to raise some points. I'm not going to really talk about what's the book because the book is about, I mean, it's a fairly, the subtitle is fairly self-explanatory. It says that how a modern manufacturing sector grew by stealth in Kerala. No? That's a bit tongue-in-cheek. I put in the word stealth because nobody seems to have noticed it. That's all. It was not that it was very secretive or that everybody, that those success stories were all achieved undercover or surreptitiously or anything like that. I don't think that was the message. The message was nobody noticed it. And so what surprises me is the fact that people are surprised about most of the information which is contained in that. And this is all public, in the public domain. The success stories are all non-officially put together that way. All I have done is connect the dots in a way which it's maybe slightly different from the previous. So, however, I thought I'll just talk about essentially what is the book about. I mean, there is a broad message behind the book, and that is most of our discourse tends to be, and this is not only true of Kerala. Most of us, it's mostly eddies around anecdotal information. Everybody knows something. I know why this company, I know somebody who did this, I know somebody, and we don't bother to correct all the things we know in the basis of fresh facts. We stick to whatever we know so well. So, like everybody knows, Kerala is unfriendly to business, Kerala is hostile to industry, manufacturing industry definitely cannot thrive here. This is the wrong place for it. And usually when we say it, everybody who listens will smile because the smile is a smile of agreement with the proposition that yes, this is not a good place for business. So I thought this actually just indicates our tendency to fall for anecdotal what's called conventional wisdom. And sometimes I think even if Bernard Shaw or Oscar Wilde may not have said this about wisdom, they should have. What I'm going to say is that my experience has been throughout my life that whatever conventional wisdom says, when in doubt, do the exact opposite of that. And you will mostly be better off by doing the exact opposite of what conventional wisdom tells you about a situation. So, for example, I recently read a book and I very strongly recommend that. Much I recommend that way more than reading books. It's a book by a journalist called S. Rukmini. And the book is called Old Numbers and Half Truths. And what she does is, this whole book is a superb analysis of how poor understanding or deliberately miscurating data can give you completely wrong picture of a place. Let me just take a couple of examples from that because my book is, I come to that theme. So I think the broad theme is, see, my book is not that I discovered 50 companies which nobody knew about. That would be, I mean, it's a very private proposition to say that 50 companies succeeded in Kerala. It's no big deal. That's not news. In fact, I tried to understand why did they succeed in Kerala. So in other words, not because it's in Kerala or anything like that. The question which I asked myself was, at a time when, for very well-known reasons explained by economists, there was one hypothesis about the Dutch disease, curse of the Dutch disease, which is when there is either a raw material discovery like a plentiful oil discovery or some other thing like this, which just comes out of nowhere. It tends to act in a way which is very adverse to the development of that concerned economy. And there are many examples, and this came to be known as the Dutch disease hypothesis. So the Dutch disease hypothesis had forecast that for various reasons, the tradable sector, which is mostly the manufacturing sector, in this economy would suffer because of rise in wages due to these other factors, which I don't think we need to go into here. And because of the rise in wages due to the operation of the Dutch disease curse in Kerala. And why did the Dutch disease curse happen in Kerala? Because of remittance, inward remittance. It started growing from the late 80s. In the late 80s, when they started from an annual inward remittance of about 1.5 crores in the first year, 10 years later, it was 50, it was about 100. And by 2010, by 2015, it was 85,000 crores and counting, growing year after year after year. And since I am associated with a bank which accounts for 21% of India's inward remittances, the inward remittance figure hasn't come down yet. Unlike what people think, it is not decreased at all. In absolute terms, still growing. But as a proportion of Kerala's gross state domestic product, it's declining. See, it had reached its peak around 2010, when it was around 22 to 25% of gross state domestic. And now it has fallen to around 14%. And it's falling. So what has happened is in the last 10, 15 years, simple arithmetic should tell us the gross state domestic product was growing faster than remittances. That's what it means. Because remittances were not declining. Isn't it? So if gross state domestic product is growing faster than inward remittances, somewhere in the economy is suffering. You should deny that. So I'm saying, so the point in the book is not that the Kerala economy grew. Obviously it grew. That was not the point. I was trying to understand when deindustrialization has forecasted by economists and by various others, should have and actually started happening in the 80s and 90s, etc. You see the figures of manufacturing contribution as a share of gross state domestic product was steadily declining. That somewhere along the line that seems to have been arrested, and now it is slowly beginning to grow. So which means some very interesting things happen. Now, when we say that the manufacturing sector in Kerala was declining, I think many of us must, we don't think of Kerala as an industrialized state, but the manufacturing sector was accounted for by, we had a fairly large manufacturing sector. What was that? Cashew processing, coir processing, traditional coir processing, very basic spices processing, that just cleaning, packing, and shipping, and brick style, handloom, handicraft, etc. So it was not as if we did not have any manufacturing sector. We had a very significant manufacturing sector. So earning good money. Now that manufacturing sector was severely hit by the rise in wages. That part of the tradable sector which was most badly affected by the rise in wages was the manufacturing sector. And since all of us know about the cashew sector, it's a low-tech sector. Cashew, coir, all these are low technology, high manpower sectors. What are called factories were mostly just sheds where with very primitive, very little use of power and lots of people employed. So when those sectors decline, what did it mean? It meant not only a loss of manufacturing output, but more significantly, it meant the loss of employment, which was huge. And there was a lot of distress because this was mostly semi-skilled employment. And these people were not, in a position to very easily retrain themselves into. They came from a social strata which was also very depressed because of the fact that the wages paid by this sector were very ordinary wages. So this massive impact on the manufacturing sector in terms of a decline, which was massive because of the fact that it was a traditional sector, output and employment. So there was an immediate impact which was reflected in terms of a decline. You see the decline in terms of the share of manufacturing in gross state domestic products falling. It has fallen to 7%. And then it sort of bottomed out. And now in retrospect, I'm saying, no, what very few observers noticed was probably it seems to have that decline seems to have bottomed out. And then it seems to have stabilized. And then now it is slowly beginning to grow. But the real interesting story is hidden by these numbers because the percentages don't explain that. The real interesting story is if we just take in value terms, there are questions which we really will be then forced to ask. What are the things value terms? See, if you take in the 1990s, I'm just saying these numbers are mostly taken from economic surveys and the economic reviews which are brought out by the state planning board. And I'm not saying that I'm only taken from that, I've taken from other commentaries. So I've also converted it for easy understanding to dollar terms. So there are again problems in terms of, is it current dollars, is it constant? So we have to make allowances for all of that. But I'm saying without getting into the finer points about all that, if you look at the manufacturing as percentage of gross state domestic product, when it fell to its lowest point, it was around 7% in the 1990s. At that time, the GDP, gross state domestic product of Kerala was estimated to be about $35 billion. So 7% of that, say 10% of that is $3.5 billion. So 7% of that will be a little less than, just a little less than $3 billion. So the manufacturing, gross manufacturing value of the day, as in value terms, was around $3 billion in 1990s. Today, the gross state domestic product of Kerala, if you take the latest and convert it to current exchange rates, it comes to around $130 billion. And if you take the latest figures, around roughly 9.5 to 10% is the market. I've got various conflicting figures, but I'm taking, actually I assumed in my book a higher figure of 13 to 14%, but it looks like figure of 10 to 11% will be closer, 11%. But if you take 10% of gross state domestic product, $135 billion, it is $13.5 billion, 10%. So value terms in this 25-year period, the manufacturing sector has grown in value terms from less than $3 billion to more than $13.5 billion. Number one. Number two, you must factor in the fact that it had faced a significant decline where the major manufacturing sectors which were coir, cashew, and basic spices processing and all that had declined. And employment had significantly declined. So not only was that decline arrested, it was made up. So even if the figure doesn't look really dramatic, whether it's 10%, just take the value terms. The gross value added of manufacturing in 2020 is a number which is actually quite amazing, given the fact that there has been undisputed decline of the traditional manufacturing sector. So what two things have happened next? One is This is a surmise. What has been happening in Kerala is actually a transformation of a traditional manufacturing sector into a modern manufacturing sector. So the basic uh, outlines of a modern manufacturing sector seem to have been taking shape right below under our noses in this state. During a time when we were expecting actually deindustrialization to be taking place in this state. So not only did deindustrialization, of course, deindustrialization happened in the traditional manufacturing sector. But not only was that compensated for by replacing it with a small, what started very small in the 1990s and the early decades of this century. But now it's gathering steam in terms of a modern manufacturing sector emerging, which is competitive and which has some very interesting characteristics. All the companies which I looked at, some of them do use local raw materials, like Synthite, for instance, sources some of its spices. If you take the total tonnage, I think it will be only a small proportion of the spices that it possesses in its Kerala. A lot of it comes from outside the state because their sheer processing capacity is so high that they account for 30% of the global output of specialized oleoresins, flavors, essences. For a small manufacturing enterprise, tell me which other manufacturing enterprise in India accounts for this percent of global output. You take the biggest companies in India, which is now I won't name them, they're very much in the news recently. Take any one of them. What is their share of global output? 1%, 2%. That's what it is. Here is a company which hardly anybody talks about, is rarely referred to, seen in the media. It's a global share. And this is not a field which is free of multinationals. There are plenty of multinationals, some very well-known companies operating there. And Synthite has 3 factories in Xinjiang province of China. Why? Why did he go and put up the factories in China? I still remember somebody saying that one more stick beat Kerala with was why didn't they put those factories here? See, because there was something wrong with Kerala, obviously. Otherwise, why did Synthite go and put the factories in Xinjiang? The real answer that I got it from the horse's mouth, I spoke there, was the Chinese government said you are buying that raw material, that particular chili and that particular whatever which is grown in the Xinjiang province, we give you all the help. Why don't you say? They said that, but it makes a lot of sense. So they said it's in Xinjiang province. That's how smart industry operates across the world, isn't it? If it's not, I mean, do we at all ask it? Do we at all ask Tata's the question as to why did you go out of Jamshedpur to set up factories and move across the world? It's a vote of no confidence in Jamshed. Do we at all? Or if TVS sets up a factory somewhere else, Tamil Nadu, we say, Tamil Nadu is not a good place for industry. We don't. But we are ready to think that. So I think these things tell us more about ourselves than about the state which we are talking. Actually, it tells a lot about our tendency, general outlook, which is not constructive at all. In the sense I wish I could take a charitable view that it's good to be self-critical so that we will improve, etc. I think carrying that becomes destructive. It doesn't have any constructive. And that's what actually has led to, in fact, in many discussions in which I have participated in over the last 25 years in my role as an entrepreneur, 30 years as an entrepreneur. I've often found myself a lone voice in the room with many other people from business and industry in the room. And when we talk about the fact that if I say something positive, that yes, it's possible to do things in Kerala. The view is still no. As if any sensible fellow will just across the border and there for paradise, I have absolutely no problem. Everything is great. You just go across. So here the thing is to break some of these stereotypes. That was one of the intentions. And then, as was mentioned by when you were saying the purpose, when I said, was to stir a discussion and to to even provoke controversy. I wanted more than anything else that people should not treat these things as self-evident truths because they were mostly not true. Also, these perceptions. And so people should develop a questioning mind about these things. And if when confronted with facts and figures, so just I just want to give some examples by others who made me think about some subjects just to show you how powerful this notion of conventional wisdom is in affecting our thinking. So one I referred to this I very strongly recommend all of you know of it. It's really worth the investment. It's just it's a beautiful book. It'll make you think, it'll make you reassess many things. On another occasion, I heard a lecture by Mohan Gopal. He's a very well-known legal luminary. He's from Trivandrum. He worked with the World Bank for many years. And then he came back to head the National Law School of India as its director. Then he went on to, I think, head the National Academy of Juridical Sciences in Bhopal and other places. And he came to deliver a lecture at the Institute of Management and Government, I think many years ago. And I was there and I was fascinated by the lecture. Mohan Gopal was talking about the legal system in India. Now that's another thing about which we all know so many things. One of the things we know is how slothful it is, how inefficient it is, how dilatory it is, how it is, no cases ever get decided. And we all have stories, personal, anecdotal accounts, which will all prove, again, in inverted commas. For the first time in my life, I came across a who made me question all what I thought I knew about the judiciary because he presented facts. What he did was he presented data to show how many cases, in different levels of courts, how many cases are filed, how many cases are disposed of, and how many cases remain. So at the end of in a year, typical accounting jargon, what is the opening balance of number of cases pending? How many fresh cases were filed during the year? How many fresh cases, how many cases were disposed of during the year? And how many remain at the end of the year? He took the figure for India, for the petty courts, not the Supreme Court. I think he took not the Supreme, he excluded the Supreme Court and High Court and took all the other lower courts. And he compared it with the figures for US. What was astonishing was the case disposal in a year by an Indian presiding officer was not statistically very different from the case disposal of a US judge or magistrate. Is that the picture you and I have after reading Terry Mason and and all these books and we watch all these things on TV and all that, and we see what great judicial the United States has, everything, everybody has soup and speaks like we can have a because the Rajan English no American. So we appreciate, we must appreciate them for all the right reasons, not for, So here was a piece of information which was astounding that the case disposal. So he said, then the next piece of data which he gave was, he gave a data showing what our proportion, as a proportion of population, say, per 100,000 people, how many judicial officers are there? I don't remember the exact figure, but I remember the United States had 10 times more judicial officers per, say, 1,000 population or per 100,000, 10 times more than India has. So what Mohan Gopal said is, when your case load is this, when the number of cases, why are you surprised that the pendencies keeps increasing year on year? You have a system not geared for it. You are not giving it the resources for it. And we sit here just saying that is because the judges and magistrates are sloppy around, they're sloppy. Courts don't look like courts, which we see, which we imagine what courts should look like. So here was another, for me, it's really made me think, and it's just, after all these years, I almost remember Mohan Gopal's lecture word for word. because of the fact that every fact which he got there was astonishing for a person like me, because it went against what I thought I knew. And then I realized that what I thought I knew was all anecdotal and unverified, and accepted as gospel. And I was basing all my perceptions on gospel. In this book by Rukmini, and I just said that I think English must have said enough things to provoke so many questions, I'm sure. So I will just end one more thing. Rukmini, in her, again, this is about data. So it's how information and data can be misleading. She says, another thing which we all know, especially the educated classes in India, is India is unsafe for women. India is an unsafe place for. If you look at the number of molestation cases, the rape cases, the etc., not just those cases which are filed, but the cases which are decided. Which of those cases finally get decided? Very few of those cases finally, cases taken up for investigation, cases charged, finally cases decided. Everywhere the record gets worse and worse and worse. So not only is it that this place is unsafe for women because of crime against women, we are convinced it must be among the highest in the world. But look at the judicial system. This makes a mockery of everyone goes from justice. She provides a very interesting evidence. He is a journalist, so he has gone and dug into this and finds in many of these states where the highest number of such cases are filed, 75 to 85% of the cases filed are actually elopements, where because they are people from another class, the offended, the higher caste parent who cannot stand the humiliation of the fact that the father has run away with somebody, files before only a kidnapping complaint, and then that is to add to the severity of the case. Then that is later on during the investigation. It is say the seriousness is raised, or you can say lowered, which are maybe to get into rape and all the other things. And when the investigation is done, it will be found that the case is actually not anything connected with this, not kidnapping or anything, but mutual consent. They were some, even if the testimony is taken, the police intervene, there are records already according to the order. But and then during the investigation, the case will be dropped because there is no case. So now just look at how the data can be presented if somebody was not as diligent as Rukmini in going into the data, saying, see, as it is, all the cases are not filed. Those cases which are filed, they are not taken to, they don't go to trial because the investigations are stopped because the matter drops there. What she's finding is that when the investigation is done and that is very clear from irrefutable evidence that this was not an elopement, but it was an elopement, kidnapping. And the matter, you can't, unless sometimes they do it. They will have you wrong matter. So here, this is not to say that nothing of that kind happened. Please, let's not find any extreme conclusions like that. It just puts a different color on something which many of us have taken, I think, fairly uncritically about reports about violence against women and girls in this country. One significant part of it is due to the way the judicial system is used by the protagonists involved in cases like this particular kind of cases. So this is just, there are many examples which go on to given in different circumstances, showing how information can be massaged, misused, and curated and presented in a way which will give a picture from. And she has very interesting chapters on why almost all the all the exit polls are wrong. Why the pathologists are sometimes way off the mark, despite everybody. And then he has gone and interviewed some of the top people like Roy and others, all that, and got some very interesting answers from them about why they made certain statements and how they turned out to be completely wrong. So I think one of the things I have learned from life is that mostly things are not what they seem to be, and that we should ask questions. We should learn to be skeptical about statements and assertions which are made, and usually we will find that there is an inverse relationship to the veracity and the confidence with which it's uttered. The more and more confidence in the person uttering that statement, I think the more and more you should feel this probably needs to be really looked into, and we must be more and more skeptical for such cases. So I think I will just end there with one statement which I want to make. At the end of the book, I propose hypothesis. Actually, that's the main point of the book. Actually, the main point of the book, which is not well brought out in the subtitle or anything, is the importance of public policy in industrial development. And I have forward a hypothesis. It is just a proposition. I don't have we didn't have the time, the bandwidth, or the knowledge to do the investigation and research. I think many more people should do it. So, if it is a fact, it is a fact that the modern manufacturing sector is emerging. Now the question is why? Why did it? What are the factors which contributed to this modern manufacturing sector emerging, despite many structural reasons being present should have prevented the emergence of a manufacturing sector? How come it emerged still? So my hypothesis is that this is where public policy comes in. And before I just go to my, I just need 2 minutes for this. Before I go to that, I just want to give an example. Public policy. It's a beautiful lecture by Cambridge economist Ha-Joon Chang. He's a Korean. Ha-Joon Chang talks about public policy and economic development. That is refuting this Western notion, especially promoted by Bretton Woods twins, the World Bank and the IMF, that you just leave the economy alone, you stay away, do minimum intervention, and probably without cleaning the drains and this and that, and leave everything to the private enterprise and the market. You will find your country is developed and it becomes an economic superpower. And he says that's not what happened in South Korea. And he explains what happened in South Korea. So he says after the Korean War, South Korea emerged as a destroyed, devastated nation with no raw materials, a war devastated economy. The government, which was that time a military junta, decided that they want to develop their country. And they decided, somebody among them, one group decided, they wanted a steel plant. So they went to the World Bank and put a proposal to the World Bank saying, please give us a loan from $50 million for setting up a steel plant. And the advice to the World Bank gave them, they turned down the request. And the advice they gave them was, you don't have iron. You don't have a heavy machine building capacity, heavy engineering tradition. You're an agricultural country. So you stick to that, what you are good at. No, it seems so reasonable, so sensible. What we are taught of theories of comparative advantage and the old ideas for how economic trade, how international trade starts. So they said, so if you want steel, buy it from the Japanese or buy it from the Americans, preferably the Americans, etc. So the South Koreans are made of little stern stuff. So they politely said, thank you. And then they left. And then they went to the Japanese. And the Japanese had, because of the treaties which were signed after the end of the World War II, under war repressions, they had to give a certain amount to South Korea. So South Korea said, you give us some money to set up the steel. So the Japanese gave them the money. And they set up a steel plant. This country, which had no steel, no heavy machine building experience, no heavy engineering, definitely no steel making experience. They set up a small company which has come to be known as Moscow, the second largest and the second most efficient steelmaker in the world today. And what is interesting is, and that I'm not saying adds to the story at all. The first CEO who was appointed to run this steel plant, which probably there were very few Koreans who could spell steel. The first CEO was a retired general who probably the only connection with steel was the sword which he carried in belt and the rifle which he carried in his hand. That's all. This connection with steel. He hadn't been to Harvard or any one of these places, etc. Anyway, they built it's a apocryphal, it's not apocryphal, it's fact, because it's born on the fact. But it's a very interesting narrative about the power of strategy, and in this particular case, the power of public policy. So the hypothesis which I put forward here is something like that actually happened in Kerala. Achyutam Menon, when he was chief minister in the 70s, together a very small group of people whose advice he sought, including Professor K. Raj, Dr. P.K. Gopalakrishnan, and then K.P.B. Nambiar, and one or two others, including the consulting Dr. Valiathan and others. And out of those discussions, anecdotally, I know I have had access to people who were members of that group once in a while. It was not a formal group, they had no formal this thing, they just met. But when they sat together to decide what should be the economic future of Kerala, the idea which came up was that a future just based on primary processing or secondary processing of agricultural raw materials produced in this state is not a great future. Instead, what they said is the future must be based on value added manufacturing. And obviously, if you are taking up manufacturing, you have to select a sector which was not raw material intensive, because we had no raw materials other than some humanite and monazite sands. That's all. There was nothing else. So just like I don't think it's a coincidence that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, Southeast Asia, and Kerala, this think tank or this small group, all came to the same conclusion that electronics sector is the way forward. And they found the right man to do it, who was K.P.B. And so the born out of these discussions, so the idea was how to kickstart industrial development in a non-industrial society. So the idea was to create this an industrial base of electronics manufacturing, and the model selected was to spread this in as many different locations as possible and not concentrate it in one big unit somewhere. So spread. And it must encompass an entire range of electronic products and not just one or two. And definitely not just in consumer products. It must go into a whole range. And so KPT Nambiar came up with this idea. So you had Caltron, and Kerala State Electronics Development Corporation is the name of the company. We all know it as Caltron. Caltron was the brand. So the name of the company represents what? Electronics Development Corporation. Develop an electronics industry in the state. That is what its mission or mandate was. They set up companies all over the place, isn't it? From Keltron controls, Keltron printed circuit board, Keltron rectifiers, or Keltron peripherals, Keltron consumer products. So I don't think there was a single district in this country, in this state, which did not have a Keltron. And I know that probably many with management pundits must have said this is all wrong strategy, this is not the way to do it, you must select one area, core competence, all those ideas about it. But I think the idea was not that probably this group was not aware of management strategies about that. But this was part of the deliberate strategy. So this part of it was to create this in an astonishingly short time. And with the significant resources had to go into it, but still it was not of the order of what we would only imagine. Electronics based, that's nothing short of miraculous. That story has not been told. I'm saying we have to think of and we talk of Keltron having failed. That's itself a very arguable proposition. Did it really fail? So I'm saying that that's another subject. But the story of Keltron itself has no. The way I see what little I know there are other people in the group who know far more about Keltron than I know. So they were part of the story. It is really astonishing that in such a short time, how massive, diversified, dispersed electronics manufacturing base was created, and thereby an industrial base was created in a place which did not have. So that was the first thing. As part of deliberate public policy, again, this emanating from the ideas of the same group, but in this case, taking full advantage of a Government of India scheme, which was announced, Government of India at that time announced to all the states that just like the Government of India has set up a chain of large central laboratories, they encouraged the states to set up their own councils for science, technology, and environment. In the case of Kerala, it was also Kerala Council for Science, Technology, and Environment. And they said, under that, you choose those areas where you want to generate and create knowledge and research, which is pertinent to your state. So, what are those areas you choose? No other states took, to the best of my knowledge, at that time, took that offer of Government of India seriously, except Kerala. Kerala, because again, emerging from this small group, they said, let's set up, and they set up Center for Earth Science Studies. The Center for Development Studies actually came up. Chittorgarh Institute, Forest Research Institute, PG, Central Water Resources Development and Management, Central, not Central, I think the Eurocrops Research Institute or one of those things. So there were a few more. So all these came up in areas which were relevant, water resources development. I mean, those are the kind of areas forest researchers. Marvelous place, with enormous capacity, were all created there. And look at the vision, just like this group chose the best person they could find, come down and set up the KSETC, that is Nambiya. They found the best people to come and set up each of these. The Center for Earth Science Studies was set up by Harsh Gupta, who was an acknowledged international expert in geology. For the Forest Research Institute, Dr. Ganapati was brought down from the Dehradun Forest Research Institute at Dehradun. He was an international authority in forestry. And he was not even from Kerala. I think he was from Kut or someplace. And so each one of these places, they found the best people to come down and set these up. And so these institutes were set up. Now, what was the importance of that? Almost 8 to 10 such institutes set up. Now, suddenly, for the first time, a young person graduating from a higher education institute in Kerala with a postgraduate degree in science or with a PhD in science could get a job in Kerala. Before that, they had to go outside Kerala. If you go to any of the public sector labs, the large central labs, or the large giant public sector undertakings across India, one of the sure things you will find there is a cricket association. Why Kerala association? Because I remember I did my professional training as part of my, as a young IAS officer, I did a heavy engineering corporation. And if the township there, the township of heavy engineering corporation had a population of 0.5 lakhs. The township. And that had 4 community associations. Not one, had 4. So the point is, Malayalis were trained or educated or technically qualified to go to distant places because in those days there were no jobs. Because none of these large public sectors were set up here for various political reasons. And no big labs were set. Please, Kerala Council for Science Technology came on. While many people from all over India also came, most of the people took jobs here. So what happened was, so these two things happened. That means first was a chain of dispersed manufacturing facilities on the telecom was set up. Then these labs were set up. All this happened in the 80s, late 70s and 80s. By sheer serendipity, a third thing happened which really reinforced this setting up of Survey Space Center in the late 60s and 70s, and which came to flowering in the late 70s and 80s when all the the liquid propulsion center, Valimala centers, and Mahendragiri, and all these big centers came up, which meant suddenly in a place like Trivandrum, which was a very provincial princely capital, you had Marathi Association and Bengali Association celebrating Durga Puja, because people from all over. So dozens, hundreds of thousands of technically. I remember this very well because I was a young guy doing my research and spending time at University of Kerala and CDS library and all that. So in the evening, we all used to come to Indian Coffee House at Spencer Junction to solve the problems of the world. So when we are sitting there, we used to interrupt our conversation. These new recruits in the Keltron who are working in Keltron, and they'll be talking in different accents, and you are enviously at them because these guys look so. And most importantly, they have been spent with meeting lots of inferior students. And so, and they were also joined by engineers from different survey spaces, many of them from the premier engineering institutes of the country, etc. So these three things combined together put in place, it's a hypothesis that a different kind of technical industrial culture was the seeds of that were laid by these developers. So when guys now, so this happens. Now the proposition here is that there are different ways in which public policy operates. You can either have very proximal directed public policy by saying we'll set up a steel mill or we'll set up this. Or you can have a climate control approach, an almost agricultural approach towards industrial development, which is by saying we create the conditions for industrial development. In other words, we will plow the soil, we will water it, we will see that all the harmful things are kept away, like pests and diseases and whatever it is. And we will, if you need any support for some nutrients and all that, we try and give you all that. The rest is up to you, and finally, a lot is up to the plant. Isn't it? Whatever is planted has to finally do all the real hard work and grow there. So this approach to public policy is what I am proposing, is what really happened. So when guys like me, and here I am now coming to serve I know what happened in my case, I know what happened in the case of a few others with whom I spent time discussing. But I didn't interview all the 50 people because many were quite reticent and did not want to talk about their businesses, which is understandable because they didn't know what rules I'm going to put this information to, etc. But one of the many factors which helped a small startup like mine, or which helped CD Jacob when he started with 5 lakhs investment, a small company to make spice oleo resins, or when PK Ahmed was a flour merchant, took over a sick steel rolling mill called Janta Steels because he feels sorry for the workers. 70 workers who were not want to work. PK Arman felt sorry for them and he took it over. And then his family asked him, Ahmad, do you know anything about steel manufacturing? He said, "அதெல்லாம் நம்ம படிக்கிறேன்." He sent his son, PK Moindu, was his eldest son. He told him, go and learn all about steel making. And Moindu tells me the story. I know it's absolutely true. Exactly what happened. Moindu sat there first day thinking, what is he going to do for steel manufacturing? And from there starts this story he develops. Now, it's obviously, it's not like a fairy tale. It cannot happen just like that. So he needed help. He needed technical expertise. I needed technical expertise. So did CD Jacob. So did Kuriakos of Netcare. So did all these other people. Where do you get them to come to a place like Canada if you have to import them from very far away? Which was the initially I remember when I advertised, not the same day I applied. Because I advertised in the Hindu and all these places, but nobody applied because the address was wrong. The address was wrong. And I still remember one guy who came for the interview, came by mistake for the interview. So he came because I was giving him plane fare to Trivandrum. No plane fare from those days. So he came down for plant manager. So he said he made a mistake, he told me, because he didn't realize the job was in Trivandrum. And then I asked him, why is there a mistake? He said, sir, how can I explain Trivandrum on my CV? At the next job when you're going to, obviously, will ask him, what is this? What will so he said, I find it very difficult to explain. That was the kind of those were the perceptions. I think what we found technical expertise in the most unexpected places. We found it mostly locally. We didn't have to get people from very far off. We found that there was a lot of interest among bright young people to come in, and I actually think places like Kentron along had a role to play there, because all these were now the time, it was not just the government job, which was the only goal of any class family was for their children to get a government job. This idea that you can get a job in a manufacturing place and have a secure future, etc. I think all these are part of the social kind of change which has to be brought about, which is a long, drawn-out process. So I'm sorry I took much longer than what I had planned to take, and I was hoping we need much more time, but the subject is so gripping for me that I get carried away. So I will stop here, and I'm sure many of you will have questions and comments, and I'll do my best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shri Balagopal. It was such an invigorating and insightful speech. And as you can see today, the gathering is rich. It's full of so many gems and jewels of our business cake here. And I'm sure our interaction is going to be just as rich. So I request you to please raise your hand so that our usher can get you the mic.
Life member GMA, Vice Chairman I still remember the golden days when you were the chairman of NAQR Trivandrum. I was a committee member on it. At the time, your vision was to bring about the quality consciousness at schools and education. Now that the conventional wisdom regarding manufacturing sector has to be reloaded, would you recommend the same for this particular area also to start up at education, create awareness in education? That's my question.
Yes, I mean the brief answer is absolutely yes. Whatever we all thought, it's not just my. I was just thinking that I think was right on the nail in terms of see a lot of I think developing a manufacturing culture is about the second part, that is the culture part. It's very interesting that I think that phrase is ascribed to Peter Drucker, who said that culture leads strategy for breakfast. So, in the sense that what he was, what he I think was meaning was that manufacturing and outcomes and results are not some, and the machinery you install and the kind of product which you're going to make, or it's also about the what is the work culture which you develop there. So, for instance, quality is one thing which starts in the mind. So if you are if in that area you are the kind of people or community which says, this the first time you make something, whatever it is, that's okay, chalta hai, that kind of thing, then that's the quality you get. It doesn't matter what your quality policy says, and it doesn't matter what your specification sheet, everything will be the same. On the other hand, why the Japanese quality is so great, it's not actually the result why their manufacturing processes and manufacturing excellence reached world beating levels was what happened inside the mind, not what I have seen in Japanese factories, unobserved, when I'm standing outside the glass observation box and looking inside. A worker is working, and he solders something, and then he takes the multimeter and he does a test, and then he looks at the wires. Nobody has asked him to do that. Nobody's observing him. So, and he did that about 4 times. So I turned to, because along with me was standing the head of manufacturing of the Japanese company. So even before I could ask the question, he knew what I was going to ask. So I think what I was going to ask is, why is this guy not getting it right? Why is he doing it 4 or 5 times? That was my question. His boss tells me he got it right the first time. In other words, it was within the acceptance limits, ±2, say. It was within the acceptance limits. But he wanted a deflection which was as close to perfection as possible. Nobody asked him to do it. ±2, he would have passed the first time he got it right. But he did it till the needle wasn't ready. That's culture. And we learned that when we learned the Japanese in our factory. Their approach to things. Every little thing was, because not the technical knowledge which was awesome, but their work culture which was awesome. So I think we need to, one of the things about industrial, for sustainable industrial development and success in industrialization, is to develop that work culture. I agree with you. I think it should start with school, and actually it's connected to everything, including coming on time to class, and finishing things on time and doing things neatly. And for example, we've all seen those things on YouTube about Japanese school children cleaning their classrooms after class is over, before they go, cleaning their cafeterias, isn't it? Japanese spectators at the Qatar World Cup cleaning up the stadium after the match is over. I mean, who asked them to do that? That's culture. I hope I've answered.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic see very things behind the requests. I come back to Kerala the last 1 year. I've been working both in India and outside Kerala, outside India for the last 30 years. Something which surprises me is that Malayalis, who are there outside Kerala, who are outside India, especially Kerala, I mean, they are a different personality. They have got a different personality. So the place or it's the people or the policy which probably brings them into their inner self when they come into Kerala. Because I've seen lots of Malayalis, as rightly said, in Delhi, in Nagpur, Nashik, in Mumbai, they're the most aggressive entrepreneurs in the world. They work like as a business model. You go to the Gulf, as rightly said again, They work as if there's no shame, there's no, they can do anything at the start. Very open, very open in terms of how to work, where to work, how long they work. But when they come back, I experience that or do this. When they come back, something stops them. So is it the people? Probably not. Is it the place? Probably yes. Is it the policy? Big question not.
So there again, I think it's a lot of perception issue. For example, here again, one has to just look at. I mean, I don't know in terms of physically how when you see the guy work. You have to look at results. You have to look at outcomes. The factory which we set up in Ulirakono here, which is a small part of Balagopal Panchayat, has grown into one of the largest single location manufacturing facilities for blood bag systems in the world, not just in India or Asia. It employs some 1,400 people, and the products are shipped across the world. The Japanese had, at that time, what I remember is they had 5 manufacturing locations for making the same product. Terumo Corporation had 5 manufacturing locations, one in Fujinomiya in Japan, there was one in Changchun in China, there was one in India, there was one in Lam, New Zealand, in Northern Ireland, and one in, I don't think they had one in the US. So, and they had one in Belgium. The Belgium one was closed many years ago because the Japanese reacted very violently to, very harshly to quality problems. They had a quality problem. And I remember when I visited the Belgium plant, not the blood bag plant, there are other plants, there are other products. So I was standing at one of the windows and I was looking out and I see a baseball diamond, baseball pitch and what looked like a rugby field. So I said, you have good sports facilities. The manager told me that was where the blood bag plant was. They got one quality complaint for that plant from, complaint came from some Scandinavian country. They sent a quality audit team from Tokyo to audit the Belgian plant. Based on the report, they not only shut down the plant, they removed the plant, lock, stock, and barrel, and there's a baseball field left. So, now of the remaining plants, what has been acknowledged as the most efficient plant with order books from across the world is the plant in Iran. They shut down their plant in Changchun because there were no orders for them. China, the manufacturing powerhouse of the world, that making the same product as our was shut down because there were no orders for them. Because each plant, because this is a highly regulated product, which comes under the toughest regulatory scrutiny across the world. Each factory has to get separate registration. So if Terumo cannot get a registration and say, okay, we will ship from our China plant or we will ship from no. The China plant must have registration for shipping to the destination country, that is Hungary. The Hungarian regulator must acknowledge that. So our plant, I remember, was approved by about 40-50 countries at that time, which was, like I call the Japanese, the greatest valuable thing off balance sheet asset of this company was the number of approvals which it had from across the world. So the answer to your question is, if you judge by productivity, if you judge by quality outcomes, and if you go to these modern manufacturing facilities, many of which I have visited, the PK Steel specialty steel casting plant in Kozhikode has been rated by Forbes of USA as one of the 8 most efficient steel casting plants in the world. It is number 1 in India, without a doubt. And one of the 8, the only one from India in the 8 most efficient steel casting plants in the world. SFO Technologies in Kakinada. SFO Technology is part of the Nest Group. And they are one of India's biggest hardware electronics exporters. Now, if you discount what I call mostly CKD jobs, which are these handphone, I mean, cell phones and all which come with most all the components made in China and come here together, made by underpaid girls in factories which employ 10,000 people, Sri and places like that. If you discount that, the highest value electronics exports from India are from SFO technologies. And SFO technologies makes what? SFO technologies makes imaging equipment for two of the biggest manufacturers of these products, Philips of Holland and GE of USA. Both of them are Six Sigma companies and they are competitors. And SFO makes the same product for the two companies in the same factory. And Philips of Holland and GE have no discomfort of it because they have so much confidence, not only in the quality systems of SFO, but in the integrity and the management systems of SFO. So, if you go to Synthite factory and you see their internal layouts and you see the labs, etc., their R&D is not it's not a tax dodge, which unfortunately many even so-called leaders in the corporate sector, big listed companies across India not spend who are very risk averse, I assure you. But here is this small company which started 5 lakhs investment by C.V. Jacob, who's from an agricultural family. And you look at the R&D centers. So my point is, what the same Keralite worker, and Keralites who work there now, more and more people are coming from. And I'm not talking about migrant worker. I'm talking about skilled people coming from other places and working in many of these centers, like Agape Diagnostics, which is India's leading in vitro diagnostic test kit manufacturer in the continent of technology. So if you look at people like that, the places like that, then nothing wrong. That's industrial movement. So I think that and the entrepreneur here is as hard as the entrepreneurs anywhere else. I assure the same. To find hardworking Malayali entrepreneurs, you don't have to go outside. Just have to go and see any entrepreneur who's working in his own business here on. You will not find anybody more working with them. The startup ecosystem in Kerala has been now rated by third-party agencies and let's say definitely in agencies which are not biased towards Kerala like Niti Aayog have rated it as the best startup ecosystem in India. How would they do that? If there weren't objective facts there. So I'm saying this transformation is happening. It has happened. It is happening. And I know, and my colleagues who work with me in Penpol know that because we started from scratch with 50 people. And in a very small plant. In fact, what we made in the first year there, whole years of, we made today in 1 day. So that's the amount of scaling up which has happened. If you see the scale of what SFO, the Synthite and all that they started, it's incredible the amount of the balance sheet size of those organizations. And so when people want to know, then why is Synthite going to they should just look at what was the balance sheet size of Synthite when it started and what is it today in quality. So I think industry culture is a thing which takes a generation to establish. Because till this modern manufacturing came to Kerala, what was manufacturing in Kerala? Cashew, coir, and very low tech, low skill kind of. That's hardly conducive to developing an industry capacity. Developing an industry culture, you need organizations like Kenpol, you need those labs, you need ESSC, and then you need these companies to come. So today, now I think such a transformation is happening. Such a transformation happened by still, the we want to set up a message and you serve this message. Oh, so that was actually, like I said, it was not a very powerful message, Satish. It was just a tongue-in-cheek observation. What I just wanted to say was, that I was saying, how come I missed this? How come we missed this? We were so busy with the narrative that nothing happens here, nothing works here, no industry work here, that we missed the fact that some amazing industries have actually come up. And if you see the story of all of these 50s, they all started small, all grew organically, and all have become national, or a few of them even global players. But all of them are national players. And the other point is very interesting. The other parallel of this cohort of manufacturers who's growing in Kerala, the other parallel with the East Asian tigers is what? Almost all of them buy their raw materials and components from very far away, bring it here, add value, and sell it very far away, and make a lot of money in the process. If you look at what Terumo Penpol is taking, not a single one of the raw material or component is sourced from any nearby. Everything comes from very far away, even overseas. So that is modern manufacturing. It doesn't matter where the material comes from. If your value addition and through the technology adopted and the skills required and the knowledge required is great enough, then it doesn't matter where the raw materials come from, how much it costs. You will be able to realize the value of it. So that was a tongue-in-cheek remark which I was trying. That's all. Yes, AJ. I must say, sir.
One second, sir. Say us.
I would say it's a fascinating journey, exposition. Couple of things. I thought what actually you are actually confessing that you fail to notice this what's happening in our own lives. But beyond taking a little bit beyond, for example, you start with the Dutch species dynamics in understanding Kerala's to which I am a party to that. But I think within that framework itself, if you extend that beyond 87, when the Kerala economy started reverting to the Kerala and the that's a period wherein beyond remittances, as Paul Romer would argue, instead of objects from the Gulf, ideas started coming in. From Southern left.
No, he's here.
Yeah, it's here. When also Sagadullas and others started, earlier it used to be in the form of objects and money, now it's ideas started coming. And the what impact that had, point number one, that creates an altogether different background. And secondly, you talked about what we call eating. In fact, Kajun Chan, he's going to come of flower of this year. And Masticata would argue the same thing. It does matter, and that big parts in these 70s and the initiatives made. It was not really so much carried forward. Probably because it was thinking for the import source of the economy, and the corresponding policy interventions were not really happening in an operating on board. And how the these two can put together. I must say that I'm only putting a kind of place. Thank you very much.
Okay. Kenji Joseph is a very good friend. He's a very accomplished economist and director of the Lati Institute, Finance and Taxation. When he stood up, I was a little apprehensive, thinking, oh no, there was something which I said. No, anyway. So my point is, yes, just to tell you what, I mean, the kind of, Kerala, many people went off to work for various reasons. And the first movement was actually out of Kerala to the rest of India, to the other states, to the other big industrial centers. And then when the Gulf boom started, a lot of people began. And steadily there has been a movement to the US and Europe, especially certain of those countries. So we are mostly being preoccupied by saying what. So the benefit for Kerala is we're thinking remittance. Well, that's only the one part of the benefit. The other thing is the ideas and the in terms of what to do, what to set up when they come back here, and etc. So, in fact, if you look at say the SFO and Nest group, Jahangir was a guy from here. He was a graduate of the engineering college here. And he went out and worked in AMD and this, I forget which company, AMP or AMD, some big companies. I know, not Jahangir, sorry, his relative. Jawad Hassan. So Jawad Hassan went and did that. And then he came back and the way, see, just look at, he didn't come back probably, but he brought back these ideas, set up Nest Group, he set up the, asset home and, all these kind of companies. So I think that hasn't been documented enough. I haven't gone into that. So I'm merely saying it's time we ask these questions about, for example, people are apprehensive saying, oh, the Gulf War is tapering off and people are going to come back. What are we all going to do? I was thinking, in one sense, it's going to be a colossal benefit for Kerala because the kind of skills these people are going to bring back in various professions, where the upgradation, just in the construction industry itself, if you look at the people, the kind of training, not just what to do technically, but they're used to working to standards. See, the most important thing in our country, which we lack in industry, is working to meeting demanding standards. Because regulatory mechanism in this country has been traditionally very weak. So we could get away with anything. That's what was great about doing business in India, is you could get away with anything. But in many of these other environments, you have to conform to standards. So you're getting people who are people working in construction industry, in manufacturing, in services sectors, etc., who are all used to working with modern technology, working to modern standards, etc. I think that's a benefit because how long it takes to train up people to just come to that level. Here you're getting them every time and train. So first it's about the one of the second question, why the policy standards to be taken in. So the policies of it was started by Achidamani in a small group which he assembled were not carried forward by the rest. But just look at what this is where I keep saying the power of strategy is what was set in motion while the setting up of Kerala State Electronics Development Corporation and all those manufacturing facilities, which brought all those people into jobs, got at least people going for 10, 20 years making those things. All those labs starting up with the capacity building which happened in terms of testing, in terms of familiarity with sophisticated equipment, etc. And the capacity building which happened because of the setting up of Vikram Sarabhai Space Center. Those were, in a sense, irreversible changes, despite neglect. So, in fact, I have said that openly in recent discussions when the industry minister was saying that thank you, Mr. Balagopal, for it. So I said, see, read my book carefully. It is not complimenting you on your industry policy. It is, in fact, if you see implicitly, it is a criticism. You are not carrying forward the industrial, the public policy which enabled all this to happen. And if we don't do it, it's a very big disservice to this state and the and the young people and the aspirations and the capacities which have been already created in this. So I think it's a very well taken point, and I fully agree with you. It has not been carried forward, but its power. The power of this strategy is that it was able to still survive despite neglect. Thank you.
We need to have a disconnect between performance and cost. That is essential. Therefore, I thought your word scale. You said it lightly. But the impression that you get from the movement is that what has happened, whatever we do in that, has not happened on the basis of public policy, but by scale, by clever people. plan is to manipulate the system. So your 50 people are exceptions rather than the rule. Will they swear to you that they did not misuse the system? You yourself talk about Nopumuli 3-4 times. Can they say that they did not pay Nopumuli? So what has happened is some people very cleverly buy self-made wealth. And you are making it into giving it a logic and saying that Kerala is no bad. So you've done a great service to Kerala, you've done a great service to industrialists. But the reality is it was by stealth. It was not by the force of the person. The example is your own example of Kerala. What happened to Keltron? Today, Keltron is making money only by selling things to the government. They buy from Bangalore, come and sell it to me as in higher education and make 8%. And they deliver goods below quality. That's the state of Keltron. I don't know you are aware. So, such a big movement. How is it that it did not happen? And when you talk about ISRO and several other central government, that has nothing to do with Kerala. These are national policy and they established it for whatever reason. And that cannot be success of the public policy. So this is where I find a little kind of what shall we say, disconnect.
So I think we'll probably have to, there is a little divergence in our reading and understanding of these points. So I agree about that the policy which was I hypothesize because we need to do research to get all the papers out and all that. But based on anecdotal evidence, I hypothesize that this kind of public policy had a role to play, and I'm trying to suggest what it resulted in was the setting up of Keltron, was the setting up of these labs, was the setting up of an industrial culture, was the setting up of a technical capacity across the state and not maybe one concentration, one center. These were all, in my opinion, necessary conditions for the growth of MSMEs. Now, all of these manufacturing success stories, today they are large. Some of them are large. 500 crores, 1,000 crores. Few of them have grown beyond that. But most of them are between 300 to 400 to 500 crores. And they're doing extremely well. Now, for MSMEs to grow to the next stage, which is say SME, when you go from the initial stage up to say 5 crores, it's the real struggle time. At that time, you depend very much on the local environment, which to sustain it. So MSMEs are completely dependent on the ecosystem in terms of you need an urban environment, you need reasonable amount of services, etc., to be available on tap. Now, these were for the first time in India, first time in Kerala, became available from the 1980s onwards. As a result of this, and especially the most scarce resource, which was technically trained people being available, locally itself, because the new kind of manufacturing coming up needed these kind of people to be available here. It was very unlikely that they would be able to access from a distant state to come and resettle here. So I think I've suggested here saying that these are just sort of directions. These are, after all, it's a hypothesis. And the way to approach a hypothesis is to try to disprove it. And every time it stands up to one more attempt to disprove it, it gets a little more set, that's all. Or if it is disproved, fine, then we are finding something else to replace it. So I think the purpose will be served if actually this can provoke studies into this. Because even if you take information, say for example, say the closure of Madura courts in Koratti, there is just anecdotal information. And I learned from the horse's mouth as to why it was closed. Madura courts, Koratti was not closed because of any lady there. Madura courts was sinking as a ship across not only in India, across the world. And they, in this place, they shamefully found an excuse so that they could just lock the place and run away without giving any of the dues to the workers. So there were some other things of that. But however, we will say the usual narrative which people are ready to believe about Mangal courses, that's because it was Kerala. What about Mangal courses in Madurai which was shut down? It says because of Tamil Nadu government. What about Mangal courses in Mumbai, in the biggest halfway meet that was shut down? Nobody said it was because of that. All that happened at the same time. But if it happens together, the narrative is different. So I'm just saying, so from anyway, so the issue is not about the map. They start with a completely different point. That while trying to investigate why did these, how come all these modern industrial enterprises emerged in a place which did not have industrial culture, what I thought where an industrial ecosystem wasn't present. I sort of would sense that there seems to be a plausible hypothesis present here. If it can be replaced by something better and more convincing, which is able to fill up all of the gaps, I think that's only good. That's the purpose of exercise. So it's actually very tentative.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for all the wonderful questions from the luminaries.